All right, it looks like we are live. So, welcome. Let's start off everything for today by first doing an audio test, and we'll do a very crude audio test. If everybody can hear me fine, please put yes on your chat so that I know that there's no issue at the audio end, and in terms of internet, we're all fine. So, if I'm audible and you guys are able to see my face, put a yes on the chat, and let's start positively with a yes. All right, so now we're beginning to get a few responses. So it looks like you guys can all hear me. So welcome Zia, welcome Natadet. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. So welcome to all of you. Good morning or good evening, based on wherever you stay. So it's my pleasure to have all of you here today for what I promise is going to be a very interesting session. It's kind of different from all the other sessions that we have done. We've taken some effort to design this in a different way, and let's get right to it. Firstly, let me introduce myself. So my name is Harsha. You can also call me Harshavardhan. I'm one of the experts as far as reading comprehension is concerned at EGMAT. I also handle critical reasoning, by the way. I have been at EGMAT for the last 10 months, and in this period of time, I've handled numerous student queries. I've helped students refine their understanding. I have taken sessions before. I have taken a lot of the paid sessions that EGMAT typically does. So I know something about RC. So that's a little bit about myself. Also assisting me today in this session is Kanupriya, who is also one of the foremost experts at EGMAT as far as reading comprehension and critical reasoning are concerned. And we also have Atreya on board to help us with all the technical aspects of GMAT Club and YouTube. So also before we begin, a big shout out to GMAT Club because I think what they're doing is really, really great. So we get all this chance to interact with students. We get a chance to teach you something. It's really, really great. And you guys get a chance to learn something new, which can help you. All right. So who's looking forward for today's session? Please put a yes on the chat so that I know that all of you are here and all of you are awake. For some of you, it's the night. So I would really want to ensure that all of you are awake and sharp. All right. So before we get into everything, let's talk about your current approach as far as RC is concerned. And this is somewhat important if you ask me. The first question that I always ask students when it comes to reading comprehension is how many of you truly enjoy reading comprehension? So that's a very important component that I would like to discuss. How many of you feel that RC is boring, or how many of you really love RC? So, what is your thoughts about RC? What do you believe about RC? Satyabrata says make notes. All right, that's how we probably have approach to RC. But what do you like about RC, or if you don't like RC, why is it that you don't like RC? Tell me your thoughts about RC. I want to get an understanding of your approach. Summarize after every para. Satyabrata, are you an EGMAT student? Kareen says boring, depending on the topic. Yes, that's a very uh, classic thing that I see students with tell us, depending on the topic of the test. This is all very good. What else? Feel it's really exciting, but not able to crack it fully in terms of correct answer. Deepak tells us that. All right. You don't like passages with heavy words like Renaissance. All right. Perfect. So today we're going to try to break some of those myths. The first myth I want you to break is RC is not boring at all. It should not be boring, and I'll tell you why. RC is a very critical part of your GMAT. You need to do well in RC. So the only way to really do well on the GMAT as far as reading comprehension is concerned is you need to start taking interest in this. There is no other way, irrespective of the topic. And one of the things that we are going to discuss today is the fact that what we're going to discuss today will not be topic specific. Everything that we discuss today is going to be applicable across all topics. It doesn't matter if you hate humanities, it doesn't matter if you hate quantum physics. I don't care what the topic is, you will find it interesting. And you will find these processes or strategies that we're going to discuss applicable. So, but the first and foremost thing is take an interest in RC. It really matters. Think about the end goal. Imagine you are already at the 730 level, as in you'd get one RC passage, a really tough RC passage. It's in a topic that you don't like. Five questions. Five questions will separate you from getting a 750, 760 and being stuck at a 730. If that's the situation, don't you want to make sure that you do not screw up that question? That's very, very, very important. So I'm seeing all smileys, crying smileys. I don't like passages with heavy words. All right. So another, now let's try to understand you. I already introduced myself. Let's understand your approach a little better. So I see varied interest in RC. The first thing I like to say, get interested in RC. It matters. Your GMAT score depends on it. That's the first thing. Second thing, let's kind of talk about how long do you typically take to read an RC passage. So how, if I know that RC passages vary in length from anywhere between 200 to 50 words to 450 words, but take your typical RC passage that you normally find. How long does it normally take to answer that passage? So is it less than 4 minutes, or is it say between 4 to 7.5 minutes, or is it between 7.5 to 10 minutes, or are you one of those students who says, hey man, it takes me greater than 10 minutes? So Akshit says 7 minutes. So let's put that here. What about the rest? 7 to 8 minutes. All right, we'll put that here. 4 to 5 minutes. That's what Ankita says. All right, it's somewhere in this bucket. That's good. 15 minutes. Puneet tells us 15 minutes. All right. What more? 4 to 7.5. One more taker for 4 to 7.5. Satyabrata is in the 3 to 5. So let's put you in this bucket. Tripti says 8 minutes. All right. Perfect. And Gaurav says around 4 to 5 minutes. Let's put you in this bucket. So already, just with the number of responses that we see here, one of the observations that really shines through, even at this stage, is that a lot of you belong to this bucket. You take anywhere between 4 to 10 minutes. By the way, on the GMAT, an easy passage, a not so complex passage, a short passage, if you may, should take you anywhere between around 3 to 3.5 minutes. And if you're doing a hard passage, a complex passage, say 4 minutes. That's about it. You can maybe, if it's a really complex passage, fair, go for 4.5 minutes. So pretty much 3 to 4 minutes is the time you should take to solve and analyze every RC passage that you see on the GMAT. Now the next question I have for you is, this is your own self-assessment. Before we begin the session, I want you guys to assess yourself and let me know, typically, what is your level of understanding? As per you, what is your level of understanding before you, after you read the passage and before you attack the questions? So I'll give you options for this as well. So is it less than 50%? Is it between 50 to 75%? Is it between 75 to 90%? Or are you one of those Zen masters who has a greater than 90% ability? This is your own self-assessment. Where do you fall in terms of your level of understanding before you start answering questions, but after you've started reading the passages, reading the passage? After you're done reading the passage, mind you. So let's hear a few responses. Anand Prakash says 75 to 90. That's great. 50 to 75. That's Manyata. Kareen says less than 50%. And be brutal, as in, if it's less than 50, great. But if you're already at 90%, you don't have to be extra modest and say, hey, it's less than 50%. You don't have to be modest also. Be realistic, whatever it is. Let's get a few more in. Deepak says 50 to 75. And Rahul says less than 50%. So far, I have one person who says 75 to 90%. Depends on the passage. But take a shot, your average passage. Satyabrata is at 75 to 90%. Ankita is at 75 to 90. That's great. Akanksha says less than 50%. Because the reason we're doing this is firstly to get an idea about where you stand as per you before I introduce anything to you. Bipin says 75 to 90. That's great. So, in this very small sample set that we have just looked at, a majority of you take between 4 to 10 minutes to read the passage, where ideally you can be done reading the passage at a very high level, trust me, within 4 minutes, maximum 4.5 minutes if it's a really really complex passage. And still there's a significant chunk at 50 to 75 in terms of your own assessment of, hey, where is the understanding. So do you see there is a gap here? It's like I'm spending the time reading RC, I'm spending the time reading this passage, but even as per me, I don't know, man, the value is not there. So Shrey Jyoti says, I find the process of skimming very difficult, and rightly so. At EGMAT, we are strictly against skimming. Skimming is not the way to do RC as per us. So you may get lucky once, you may get lucky twice, but you cannot count on your luck on the main day. So what I'm trying to tell you is, a lot of you spend more than enough time, the kind of time that you should be spending on RC, on an RC passage. At the same time, in terms of level of understanding, very few of you have the confidence of the 90 percentile or greater than 90 for that matter. What is really required to be able to get 700 plus on the GMAT or even beyond 730, 740 and beyond? You need to be here. You need to be at least at 90%, greater than equal to 90. You need at least 90% in order to get that 700 score, the equivalent of 700 score. So does this make sense? What this tells me is there is something which we can do as far as changing the way we read. Don't you guys feel that what I'm saying makes sense? And that's kind of the point of today's session. Today's session is all about changing the way you read. So let's talk about today's session. What are we going to do today? I'm going to introduce you to one of the most important concepts that exists as far as GMAT reading comprehension is concerned. It's the concept of keywords. I'm going to explain to you what are keywords. I'm going to tell you why they matter, how they really help you get a very good score as far as RC is concerned. I'm going to teach you what are keywords. I'm going to show to you how you actually use keywords to build a better understanding. And you're going to solve a 700 level passage along the way. So who's excited? Let's hear some yes or I'm excited on the chat so that I know that you guys are with me at this moment. All right, can we have a few more yeses so that I know you guys are awake? Let's go. Shrithik, that's the attitude. Perfect. That's what you're looking for, man. Good to go. Perfect. So in that case, let's start. I'm going to tell you what we are going to do today. It's somewhat different from the typical sessions that we normally do. And if any of you are EG Matters who have been to my paid sessions, you know how we typically do sessions. So this session is somewhat different in structure. What are we going to do? I'm going to make you try the passage firsthand. I'm not going to teach you anything. You're going to try the passage using whichever method you please. If you get all answers right, I'm the happiest guy here. That means my job is easier. So I'm going to make you try the passage the way you want to do it. Then we're going to take a look at the accuracy as a group. Some of you may already be at a greater than 90% level. Some of you, as per your self-evaluation, are at the 50% level. Maybe you'll be surprised. Maybe you'll do a lot better than you think. So we'll figure it out. We'll take a look at accuracy as a group, and you guys should note down your own individual scores as well. Then we're going to discuss some concepts, and that's when it gets interesting. Once I'm done discussing the concept, you guys are going to retry the passage. The only difference is you have a different lens to look at the passage. You're going to look at the passage in a different way. You're going to look out for the things that I tell you to look at from the concept that we discuss. And then we can have a look at, is there any real improvement, and so on and so forth. And then if necessary, we can also discuss what actually happens in the passage. We can do a passage analysis of sorts, and I'll show you the approach to tackle these kinds of passages. So structure makes sense. It's interesting, right? Before we begin, and this is again something that it's very, very important, and because we do these sessions all the time, please make sure that you do not put the answers on the chat, because what happens is some other student is also trying to solve it. He or she looks at your answer and it biases their mind. So please be sensitive to your colleagues who are here. Put your answers in the form. So Atreya and Kanupriya will make sure that you get all the forms. Every answer that you have to give, it will never be on the chat. Apart from these yes no questions that I ask you, every answer to a passage related question is always on the form that we'll share on the chat. Everybody aligned to this? Let's make sure the experience for everybody is pleasant. All right? Perfect. So, with that, I'm going to bring you a passage. I'm going to give you around 3.5 minutes to read this passage. And then we'll solve all the questions. We'll share, after 3.5 minutes, we'll share the form which has all the questions. You'll have around a minute, maybe for around 5 questions. You can take around 6 minutes at the maximum. And then we're going to come back here and discuss. All right. So, your time to read the passage starts now. All right. So now it's time we can start bringing in the questions. So, KP, if you can, please share the form for the questions. All 5 questions are in the same form. And once you're done with the questions, let's come back here. You should take around 6 minutes at the maximum for 5 questions. And then you come back here. Your time starts now. All right, guys, about now, you guys should be wrapping this up. Take another 30 or 40 odd seconds, and then we'll start discussing this. All right, so last 10 seconds, and then we're wrapping this up. Guys, take a shot if you're not done yet, because this is pretty much the time you should be taking on the real exam as well. So it's giving you a good feel of it. All right. So now let's kind of start discussing the answers. So all of you, make sure you're done and come back right here. All right. So let me refresh this and give me a second as I make sure that all the data comes in, guys. And very, very interesting stuff to discuss. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in our accuracy, how we fared in these questions. I'm going to put those right here as a group collectively. Individually, make sure that all of you remember your answers because we will be coming back to this. And in fact, we will be reattempting this passage as well. So, two things I want you to do. Individually, make sure you remember what answers you chose. And collectively, as a group, I'm going to bring in the accuracy of the group as a whole. Meanwhile, you guys let me know on the chat how was this question. You must have some observations, some feelings after doing this passage. Make it known on the chat and let's go about business. So let's look at the data that we have. So if I look at question number 1, the accuracy is less than 50%. Just give me 1 minute. So if I look at question 1, the accuracy of the group as a whole is 30%. Only 30% of you chose the correct answer. And that is room for us to think about. Now let me look at question number 2. How did we do in this question? And we did slightly better here in terms of the second question. Your accuracy as a group is still 40% better than the first question, but still we are not there yet. So let me just note down all these accuracies because that way we'll have data to work with. Let's look at question number 3. How did we do in question number 3? Yet again, roughly around 40% of you chose the correct answer for this. Question number 4, let's look at 35% roughly. This is the accuracy of the group as a whole. And coming to the last question, The last question is very good. Most of you seem to have got it right. So I see almost 75% here. So the last question we fared much better. So I see around 75% accuracy. Perfect. So with that, let's come here. Let me read some chats. RC is killing my score, says Ashutosh. Yes, Ashutosh, we are going to discuss that. Don't worry. Short but difficult to comprehend kind of passage. It was tricky to figure out if the author is criticizing or is just passing information. That's a very beautiful point, Akshit. We are going to discuss all that. Medium level, Bipin says medium level. Passage is written in a convoluted way. Absolutely. Perfect. Had to go through the passage again. Can you display answers also? Deepak, we are going to do it, but you guys are going to reattempt the passage. Only after that are we going to discuss answers. So my objective here is for the group to take note of where you stand in terms of accuracy. This is as a group. A lot of you have done very well. Some of you have really struggled with this passage, and that shows at a group level. 4 out of the 5 questions have lesser than 50% accuracy. Given a typical GMAT kind of time, you took around 3.5 to 4 minutes to read this passage, which is fair, and around a little over a minute overall to solve the questions, which is what you typically should be spending. So what this tells us is we all have some scope of improvement. How do we get there? Let's get right to it. So let's get into what I call the concept phase. Let's discuss a very, very important concept that I like to call as keywords. Now, pay a lot of attention. Make sure you absorb everything we're going to discuss. So the first question is, what do I mean by keywords? What the hell are keywords? That's the question. So keywords are specific words, or it can be phrases. Not, you don't have to be very technical about it. Words or phrases used by the author in a passage. First rule of RC: the passage is always written by an author. The passage view essentially talks about the author's view, because the author is the person who has written the passage. So when the author writes a GMAT reading comprehension passage, typically he or she uses some specific words or phrases. What do these actually do? That's what we're going to look at. Sometimes the author uses such words to convey a very specific meaning to you as the reader. I'll give you some quick and easy examples. Some words immediately tell you that, hey, there is a causality here, there's a cause and effect of some sort here. For example, look at this word because, since, and all that. When you see because in a statement, the one thing you can be sure about is there is some kind of cause and effect being talked about. Correct, right? Everybody's clear with this. When you talk about because A happened, B happened. So A happened because of B. The minute you see the word because, you know it's a causality. There is some kind of a cause and effect being implied. So this is one example. Another example, typically the author uses some words very specifically to indicate that some kind of a conclusion is being made. It could be his conclusion or her conclusion, it could be a third party conclusion, but some conclusion is being made. Some examples of that, and we're going to see all this in detail now. Thus, therefore, hence, when you see words like this, you know that some kind of a conclusion is being made. And those of you who have done a bit of critical reasoning, but you definitely know what a conclusion indicator is. Am I correct? Everybody is in line with this, right? Another use case, the author may try to indicate that, hey, we are talking about coincidental happenings, two things happening at the same time. An example is the word accompanied by, or the word while. So while has two meanings. One of the meanings is while A happens, B also happens. So coincidence, two events happening at the same time. So conditional can be a cause and effect. So it depends on how it's framed actually, and we can look at some examples, but it can be. That's my answer. Another typical case where an author specifically uses a keyword. Whenever there's a keyword, you have to ask, why did the author put it there? What did the author achieve by putting the keyword there? So sometimes the keyword is being used to indicate a transition of some type. For example, a transition in view. You're telling something positive about something, and then you want to indicate a change in direction. You want to say something negative about it. Typically, you'll use a word like however or although, and I'll give you an example subsequently. It can also be used to indicate a change in your timeline. For example, the entire passage up to a point is talking about what happened 19 years ago or 100 years ago, And suddenly the author will put a keyword. More recently, this A has happened. The word more recently is a keyword that's telling you that, hey, I'm transitioning from ancient times to modern times. So these are words that you should also always be paying attention to. Another very important type of keywords that you typically come across are those that continue the same line of thought. So here we saw a change in direction. You can also use keywords to maintain or continue the same line of thought. We have seen these also in action. The word also is a very, very well known example. All of you know these words. By the way, we are not discussing any words you guys are not aware of, right? These are all words you know. So additionally, also, moreover, so on and so forth. Let's look at something else. And this again is a very, very important type of keyword, what we call as comparison keywords. Greater than, lesser than, easier than. So some A is being compared to some B. So a keyword like this is also very important. And we will see why. Invariably, if there is a comparison of some sort in a passage, 90% of the time you will see one question at least which tests you on that comparison on the GMAT. One other very, very important use case, the author may want to emphasize his or her opinion. The author agrees with, say, the author quoted some scholar's work. The author wanted to tell you that, hey, I agree with the scholar. He would put it in some particular manner. So there are some words which tell you that. Look at an example is rightly so. When the author says rightly so, that's what does it tell you? Hey, I'm the author, I'm agreeing with this fellow. Right? Very, very interesting, very important. So we looked at 5 different types of keywords used to indicate a specific meaning, cause and effect, conclusion, coincidence, transitions, extending the same line of thought, making a comparison of some sort, emphasizing of opinion. By no means is this an exhaustive list, but this is a fairly comprehensive list. Not an exhaustive list. There's still tons of keywords that can exist. And as you do a few RC passages, you get a feel for everything that's tested. So, before we move any further, let me do a quick check. Everybody is with me so far? Any doubts? Is this concept clear? Now I'm going to tell you why this matters and how to use it. But is everybody clear about what we mean by keywords? Let's see some comments to that effect if this is clear. All right, Manyata, Annie, thank you. Be responsive, guys, so that we're all on the same page. And there is always a bit of a delay between YouTube and you guys, but still, make sure that you respond so that we know we're all on the right track. So everybody understands what we mean by keywords. The next question you should typically ask is, what do you do with it? What do you do with this once you identify that such words exist? How do you make it work? How do you make it work in your favor? Why does this even matter? So the first thing you understand is the author uses keywords in his passage intentionally. There's a reason the author uses it. It's he or she wants to tell you something through those keywords. Therefore, if you're able to latch on to keywords when you're reading the passage, you are basically opening a window into the author's mind. You can actually see the intent of the author coming through keywords. How do I do that? And what does this mean? This is what I want you to do henceforth from this moment, not after the session, from this moment. The thing I want you to do is, and pay close attention, as you read the passage, not after you read the passage. Don't come and look for keywords when you're going through questions and options. No use. As you're reading the passage, learn to keep an eye for such keywords. Try keeping an eye out for keywords. And once we start doing this, you will see it have work out for you. So look at try to identify keywords as you read the passage. And once you have identified a keyword, what do? You don't just read on. No. You pause right there. Take 1 second to pause right there. And then understand. Ask that question. Why did the author put this word? What is the author trying to achieve? And through that understanding, try to predict what will logically follow. Let me give you a very simple example of how it works. Imagine a passage where the author starts off by telling you that, hey, work from home. You're talking about work from home. Work from home is fantastic because it has increased the productivity of people. Why? Because there's no more travel fatigue. People are not tired because they have to travel. Therefore, productivity is great thanks to work from home. This is the statement that is given to you. So, what is this? What exactly is the statement? It's telling you something great, something nice about work from home. Now, the author puts in this word, however, and then he says something. What I want you to do from this moment is, the author told you something great about work from home, and then he used the word however. Don't just read on, pause here. Pause here and say, hey, the author used however. What does however indicate? It's a contrast. So the author indicated something great about work from home. So what can typically follow? Something that is probably not so great about work from home. This is what you predict. And then you read what's happening. Then you might see what the author actually says here. The author would typically say something like, however, work from home has been known to cause a lot of stress in employees because employees tend to work for longer hours because they're working from home. So why does this process help? So you started with plus work from home, then you had this keyword however. I asked you to pause here, understand why the author put it there, so that you know the author's intent, so you know that something negative about work from home is following. But why do you do this? How does this help you? So the concept here is what I call as priming. By doing this, you're able to anticipate what will logically follow here. Your mind is primed to receive that information at a much better level, or in other words, you're able to absorb that information at a much better level. This is a simple example, very simple sentence about work from home. But imagine reading a convoluted sentence in a huge RC passage. Imagine the power of focusing on that however there and figuring out that, hey, there's going to be a contrast. Imagine that going in before reading the sentence that you're seeing some kind of a contrast. You're able to absorb that information better because you know something about it already. Does the logic make sense? This is what we have seen. This is a proven concept. Yes, I'm an engineer. Good question, Akshit. I don't know what gave you the hint about me being an engineer, but yes, I do come from an engineering background. Yeah. But does the concept make sense? I think you're talking about priming of pumps, I'm sure. But yeah. Does the concept make sense of why keywords work? Let's put a yes on the chat if it really makes sense to you. Because this is very, very important. This is the crux of what we're going to do today. Absolutely. Perfect. Good. Good. So, do this from this moment. Identify those words. I gave you some examples of those words. As you read passages, pay attention. Just open your mind a little bit to, receive this information. You will see, you start doing this as a process. By the time you do this for anywhere between 8 to 10 passages, if you are at a 50 or 60 percentile, you automatically touch the 70 or 75 percentile at the very least, just by doing this. You will see a sharp improvement in your ability to comprehend the passage. This is one of the key skills that will really, really help you to achieve very good scores on the GMAT as far as RC is concerned. All right. So having said that, this is one of the extremely important keywords that we do. This is one of the most important things that we do, but there's a lot more of where all this came from. If I had to tell you, we in fact have a total of 7 reading strategies, and each one of them adds a level of comprehension and builds your ability to some level. So if you are interested in what else we have to offer, so one thing that I would definitely recommend is go for the free trial. If you just register on egmat.com, and there are a lot of things that are already free. So this is the closest you can get to private tutoring. So we have extremely personalized diagnostic quizzes, concept quizzes, then you have application oriented quizzes, application which makes you apply the process. You really should not be able to, you won't be able to do well in those quizzes if you're not able to apply. It's as simple as that. I'll be very, very frank. So, so a lot of it is actually free. And if you think that what we're discussing seems to make sense for you, do consider going for the free trial. I'll give you one more reason why you should ideally go for the free trial. You're learning something new today. You would want to apply it in passages that actually conform to what you expect to see on the GMAT. So the free trial works that way also. Let's also look at something that's very interesting that's going to happen tomorrow. So right now I'm talking only about keywords, but there might be some of you who want a little bit more. Hey, keywords is great, let teach me something else also. For you guys who are extremely enthused about all things reading comprehension, as you should be if you really want to do well in RC, I have this other session that's there tomorrow for you. So we are going to discuss not just keywords but a couple of other reading strategies that we typically use about sentence structure and summarize and predict. Those are very, very specific things that we do as far as EGMAT is concerned, in terms of trying to help our students do better in reading comprehension. This is also a free session, so those of you who are really interested, make sure you subscribe for this and register for this. And some of you may even be wondering, hey, so much about RC, when are we going to see something in quant? So my colleagues at quant have a workshop for you. So there's something very interesting that's happening on Sunday. This is not like the usual sessions that we have. This is kind of interesting. It's not tailored to one specific topic, by the way. It's not like you're going to look at number properties or geometry. You will be taking something like a proctored test across all topics. That test will kind of give you an indication of where you stand, and from there our experts will actually give you personalized insights on what you should do to achieve your target quant score. So very interesting stuff happening on the quant side as well. Most importantly, for all of you who are here, any of you who are really serious about the GMAT. So I understand that some of you might be planning to write the GMAT after 3 years or 4 years. You guys have a lot of time. But for those of you who have a deadline, those of you who have GMAT within their horizon, immediate horizon, you guys probably need a plan. You guys need a plan to really attack that GMAT. For you guys specifically, we have what we call as one-on-one sessions with a certified strategy expert. So over the last 5 years, EGMAT has been tremendous success as far as student success is concerned. That's what you typically see on our YouTube channels. You see on all the verified reviews on GMAT Club. We have seen phenomenal success. Our strategy experts are the guys who have been mentoring students and helping them achieve that success. So one thing that EGMAT does for students is provide a free consultation to make your own personalized study plan. If you have GMAT within your immediate horizon, having a plan will help. And having a personalized plan can help you even more. Why is that? Because it's tailored to you. It's not a generic plan I just rip off from the internet. No. It takes into account where you currently stand as far as quant and verbal are concerned. Then it tells you, as per your target score, what is it that you need to achieve. And then we put in a lot more data into that model, which includes things like, when are you planning to take the exam, how many hours can you properly put in a day or a week to achieve to in order to prepare for the GMAT. So a lot of data goes into building a very personalized study plan. It can help you for those of you who are planning to take the GMAT sometime in the near future, not for people who are planning to take it in 3 or 4 years. The issue with this is because it's not a session. A session is one to many. This, on the other hand, is a one-on-one thing, and therefore it's first come, first served. So do one thing. For those of you who feel that this will help you, do write to support@egmat.com. Our team will help you out with it. Now, having said that, let's kind of come back and bring our focus back to keywords. So everybody has understood what we mean by keywords. Everybody has understood what we are going to do henceforth as far as keywords are concerned. Shall we start applying this live? Perfect. That's what I'm looking for. If that is true, this is the first question. We're going to do like 8 or 9 questions. The first question is a warm-up question. And the reason for that is I'm telling you upfront what exactly the keyword is. Each of these questions There is a question and there are options. It's kind of similar to what you see on the GMAT, but the correct answer hinges on you identifying the correct keyword typically. So for the first example, I already told you that the keyword is argued that. That's your hint. Start answering these questions. These questions should not take anything more than a minute typically. So the form is there as always. Please fill the form and then let's move to the next question. And then we'll do it in sequence. Meanwhile, I'll read some comments from you guys. All right, folks, let's take another 10 seconds. Put your answers in, and we're going to discuss this question before anything else. Perfect. And 3, 2, 1. Good. So, initially, a lot of you chose the wrong answer, but I'm happy to see that towards the end, majority of you gravitated towards the right answer. So towards the end, around 60% of you chose the right answer, which in case is around option C. So let's understand what this is all about. In the 1980s, using the facts that shareholders own corporations, that's fact one, and that stock prices always capture a firm's true economic value. So there are two facts given here, right? Shareholders own corporations and a stock price always captures a firm's true economic value. Based on these two facts, economists argued that. So here I gave you the clue. Argued that is the keyword. So what does argued that indicate? Why did the author put argued that right here? And this is the process which I'm telling you about. You identify this as an important keyword. Pause here. When you say economists argued that something, what is that something technically? And those of you who have done CR definitely know what we're talking about. Argument, right? So if you think about an argument, you have premise and you have conclusion. So based on these points 1 and 2, which is actually the premise, the economist made the argument that, or made the argument, or argued that, or in other words, what you're looking at is actually the conclusion. Whose conclusion? Economist conclusion, right? So the economists have made a conclusion that shareholders should have more power, that's one, and executive pay should be tied to shareholder returns. So there is a premise, there is a conclusion. So for those of you who are coming in from the CR angle, you guys should have got this straight. So around 60% of you got it. Some of you actually fell for the trap of choosing option A. Option A is definitely not the correct answer. The reason is it is the premise, it is not the conclusion. What follows argued that is the conclusion. What was before that are the facts that were used. So, yeah, I see that on the comments. Reasoned conclusion. So, I'm sure you guys got this. Some of you, three of you actually chose option B. And this brings into attention another thing that you guys should know as far as RC is concerned. When it comes to RC, a little more so compared to CR, you have to put your question and your option choice through a microscope, because there's always a subtle wordplay that happens. So, what option B tells you is that shareholders have more power over corporate boards. What was the economist's conclusion? Shareholders should have more power. Should have more power, is it the same as already having power? Those three of you actually fell for this, and that's because you did not focus on this one word. Just this one word being missing here makes option B incorrect. So the correct answer here is what can be taken as a conclusion. So it should be either of the points that follows argued that, which is why option C is the correct answer. So now with this question, you guys have an understanding of what to do. Henceforth, I'm not going to identify the keywords. You guys are going to find out which keyword matters. You guys are going to solve the question, but while solving the question, you'll figure out, hey, this keyword actually made all the difference. So looking forward, shall we proceed? Let's hear some positive yeses so that we know. And if anybody still has doubts, we'll make sure we try to handle those as well. So the finer point that is being made here is, if you pause right here at this argued that, and you spend that 1 second thinking, hey, the economists argued that, so economists want to make a point. What is that point? What follows? If you did that, think about when you see this question on the GMAT. You see these options, and answering this question will take you less than 20 seconds. The time investment upfront pays a lot of dividends downstream. It's as simple as that. Good. It's good to see all those yeses, confident yeses. So let's go to what you need to understand. So what I gave you here is an example of a keyword being used to indicate a conclusion. So argued that, you have other examples. We discussed some of those. So therefore is also a conclusion indicator. Thus is also a conclusion indicator. In this words, in this sentence structure, you could have something like economists asserted that. Eventually, that is the assertion or the point that the economist wants to make. But the point is, you pay attention right there. You pay attention right then and there, you will avoid a lot of heartburn in the future. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Question 2 on your screen. And now we'll start going fast now that we have established the concept of what we are trying to do. KP, can you share the form for question 2? Perfect. Thanks. Ashutosh, absolutely. So you should be trying the form. You open the form, you should see this particular question, choose the correct answer. All right, guys, last 10 seconds to solve this. And three, two, one, and let's surge right ahead. Let me look at the results very quickly. Oh, perfect. Good. So I'm happy to see this response, guys. So I think we're doing well. So the correct answer is option C, and 90% of the batch actually got this. So we're already beginning to see something here. So, what are those two words that really matter as far as this passage? I mean, there are multiple keywords, but two of the phrases that actually gave you a hint are these two. Economists began arguing. So, the point that is being made is the economist point, not necessarily the author's viewpoint. Why does this matter? Because this question tested you on figuring out whose viewpoint is being asked. Because the question is, which of the following can be inferred from the passage? In the last question, the question was very clear. You just wanted to find out what the economist thought. What was the economist's point? Here, on the other hand, the question is asking you what can be inferred from the passage. Or, in other words, I'm not asking you about the economist, what the economist believes in. I'm asking you for what the author believes in. And that's the critical difference. And if you had really understood that, then your points of focus were these two. The question you have to ask, take according to them, for example. Why did the author put according to them there? Purely because he or she wanted to indicate to you that, hey, this is as per the economist. I may or may not disagree. You don't know that. So that is the key concept here. So most of you did not fall for option A. Why? Because option A is the economist point. It may not be necessarily what can be inferred from the passage. The author need not agree with that. Option B, in fact, is actually the correct answer for the last question. But the reason it is not the correct answer for this question is it's the economist belief. This question asks you for the passage, what the passage says. I noticed that some of you chose option B, and for those of you, this is where you went wrong. Couple of you, not very many. Most of you chose the correct answer. That's option C, because it's the only option that makes sense. Option D, by now you guys already know what the problem was. It's exactly the same point that I discussed in question one. The problem is this word should is not there in option D. Otherwise, option D would be a very tempting choice. But the option C is the only option that conveys everything that's happening here. So if economists are making some particular point, then you can definitely infer that at least a few economists think that there are two reasons mentioned. So the economist claim is based on two things. So one of the things, at least one of those reasons, is that shareholders is because shareholders own corporations. Because of that, what happens? Shareholders should have more control, is what the economists believe in. So this captures beautifully something that you can say from the passage. Economists believe that is, shareholders should have more power. Plus, it captures that one of the reasons is definitely what is given to you, because the shareholders use this to make their case. So, perfect. Thanks for the yes, Ashutosh. That I'm sure that means that you've understood this. So, the very important takeaway here is you always have to pay attention to these things because it indicates viewpoints in RC passages. And we've seen plenty of questions where the author will definitely indicate that, hey, this is according to some third party. And if you are not careful, you fall for this on the GMAT under time pressure. So, according to them is a keyword here which indicates to you that it's not necessarily what the author believes in. All right, time for question 3. Let's have the form on the chat and let's solve question 3. Well, thanks for the kind words, Akshit. So we're happy that the session is helping you. And stay tuned, we're still doing a lot more things today. All right, guys, let's get your answers in another 30 odd seconds max. Share Jyoti, we cater to state students worldwide. We are an online company. Everything you do is online. So it's all video courses, sessions by people like me. So as long as you have an internet connection, you can learn from anywhere on the planet. As far as GMAT is concerned. Yeah, Mohit, fundamentally it is a detailed question. All right, so now we should be done. Yes, we have, most of you have responded to this. And wow, now I'm beginning to see something happening. Now you guys are paying attention. So before I switch to the next slide, because there I've highlighted what the keyword is, what is the one word here that makes all the difference? Put that word on the chat. I'm looking for one word that matters. Put that one word on the chat, please. That will tell me that you guys are here. Because your answers indicate that you guys got this and you guys are beginning to think along the right lines. But let's have some confirmation on chat as well. What is that one word here that matters? Oh, we are seeing all kinds of answers. So a lot of you hopped on to however. However indicates the contrast. However is an important keyword. It is definitely one of the important words. But here your answer hinges on what Govind and Akshit have pointed out. You see that word justly. The difference, the confusion between one answer and the other will come in if you ignore justly. So did all of you understood what did any of you miss this word? You see how craftily the author has put in one word in between everything else. Why does this one word matter? What is the power of that one word? What does it tell you? Why did the author put justly there? What is he trying to tell you? And also is also a keyword. So great. So Akanksha, Mohit, you guys are beginning to have an eye for keywords. This is what I meant when I said keep an eye out for keywords. So I can see you guys are picking up on however and that. Also, they're all keywords, which is fantastic. I'm very, very happy to see that. Justly is not a it's not telling you conclusion, Kanak. So think about just it shows author's opinion. Think about what justly means. Justly comes from justice. What is meant by to be just? To be fair, right? So what the author essentially is doing is by putting in this one word justly. However, they also justly asserted that the drug levels were so low. The sentence would make perfect sense if that word justly was not there. However, they asserted that the drug levels were so low. Fantastic. It still makes perfect sense. But then you don't know what the author thinks about it. Not polarizing opinion. What it actually does is the author is telling you that, hey, as per me, if I am the author, as per me, whatever these researchers are telling you, these researchers are asserting or making a point that the drug levels are so low that there is no real danger. I agree with that. I believe that it's a very fair point to make. It's a very just point to make. So it's not polarizing opinion. It is the author indicating agreement by telling you that, hey, whatever these researchers are telling, that's perfectly fair. Do you guys get the power of that one word? If not for one word, you would easily choose option C because the question is asking you according to the passage, not according to the researcher. How do you know that the author believes the experts definitely believe that drug levels were too low? Perfect. That's known. Of course. So the the experts definitely believe this drug levels were too low. How do you know that the author agrees with it? Because of this one word justly. Otherwise, you would never know. And that's the importance of focusing on keywords. Imagine your GMAT RC passage, which has 3-4 paragraphs. Very craftily, the author will put in a word like this, justly. If you focus, if you write then and there, make an observation of that one word. Hey, what this tells you is, as per the author, whatever these guys are saying, it's perfectly fair, boss. That means I agree with it. That tells you about the author's opinion. Then, when you see a question, very easy. Perfect, Kanak. I understand your point. Swati, perfectly right. Indicates that the author agrees with the researchers. So, option A is actually the correct answer because the author also agrees with the experts, which is why option C is not correct. Because it's not that we cannot be sure, we can be perfectly sure. Right. If this is clear, let's go to the next question. Question 4. We already discussed what the takeaway is. Keywords can be used to indicate the author's opinion. Be very, very careful. Here's question 4 for you. All right, guys. So last 5 seconds for this particular question. RC matrix. We are definitely in the matrix. Nagarajan, yes. Hey, Govind, don't put the answers here, man. Makes it difficult for the rest. All right. So what we're done with this. Most of you have responded. What I can see is majority of you have got the correct answer. So um, roughly around 70% of you have got the correct answer, but there is still a 30% of you who have not yet got the hang of it. So for those of you, what is that one word, what is that one keyword here that matters? Very similar to the last question. Did you pick it this time? That's the question I have for you. Absolutely. Thanks for that, Swati and Ankita. While you're reading the GMAT RC passage, so this is a small example. This is a small passage. It's barely around, 100 words, 80 words probably. In your 250 to 450 word passage, what I want you to do is the minute you see this and rightly so, pause there. Take 1 second. Why did the author put and rightly so there? That's the question you ask. The author says whatever was told earlier, experts opine that hey, it's still best to get vaccinated, and rightly so. Or in other words, the author is agreeing with it. The author is agreeing with what is being told. Is that clear? This word tells you that so firstly, what does the passage tell you? A number of companies are getting close to releasing the COVID vaccine. Great. Experts say that the vaccines being created right now are only 50% effective, and later the vaccines that will come in later will be much more effective. Despite the fact that the early vaccines may not be as effective as the later vaccines, despite that, the experts opine, or the experts say that. So right now is the experts perspective. As per the experts, it's still better to get vaccinated right now as early as possible. This is the expert's opinion. But the minute the author adds and rightly so, that means that the author is now agreeing with that opinion. And what was otherwise just the expert's opinion, just by these three words magically also becomes the author's opinion. And if you paid attention right there, then and there in the passage, you won't make a question when you go to option choice analysis, when you are faced with a question on this. And trust me, you get questions based on this. Some of those questions you guys have made mistakes in. You remember the passage that we did, the GDP passage that we did today? Most of you have less than 50%. Overall, the group has less than 50% accuracy. It's because you did not pay attention to this. I can give it to you in writing. So, what is the correct answer? Option A is incorrect because even the experts believe it is better to get vaccinated ASAP. And this option A tells you waiting is better, which is absolute opposite of what is being claimed. Option B is correct. Why? How do you know that for sure? Why is it true as per the passage? Because, and rightly so, because the author also believes this is the correct one. This is the correct approach. It's just that phrase, and rightly so. You pick it up while you're reading, pause right there, understand. That's it. You're sorted. And that's what I want you to do. Keywords again can be used to indicate the author's opinion. So I just thought this is because it's such an important point, I gave you 2 examples for this. Question 5. Let's do question 5. Meanwhile, also put in some feedback. Are you guys enjoying what we are trying to do? Because it's kind of different from how we normally do these sessions. I'm not discussing the passage. I'm giving you some other questions, but which are intended to make you think along the right path. Yeah, Swati, C you would never be able to infer. So we will anyway be sharing the session PDF with you. Take a look at C. There's no way you can logically extrapolate that. If you can logically infer it, it might still be true, but you cannot infer it. Mohit asks a good question. Is it that a question stem is true as per the passage? So it has to be something that the author definitely believes in. Yes, it should be based on the author's opinion. The author should tell you that, hey, this is the truth. Or if the author states it, you can consider it to be the truth. Which is why scholars' opinion, researchers' opinion, you cannot say it's according to the passage. Good. Responses are pouring in. Let's be. Good. I'm happy to see that you guys are getting the hang of this now. Yes, Swati, I understood. It was about option C. And my point was also about option C only. Go back to option C. Option C, you cannot really extrapolate. We'll anyway share the session PDF with you. Take a look at that point. So let's get those answers in, guys. I want to go a little quicker because I understand we are taking a little bit of time here. Let's take another 15 seconds max. All right. So perfect. So 80% of the batch is beginning to get this now. 80% of the batch got this question right. So I'm very, very happy to see that. Let's kind of start discussing this particular question now. The one word that I really wanted you to pay attention to, there are multiple keywords. Some of you point out, right? There are multiple keywords, but here your correct answer was based on this one keyword. In turn. In turn. What does in turn mean? A happened, this in turn led to B. I'm just giving a very crude example. In simple words, it implies consequence. As a result, something happened. Evidence proof is pushing it. It's not evidence per se, Ashutosh. It's more like A happened, as a result B happened, consequently B happened. So it is a cause and effect indicator. A happened, because A happened, B happened. There is a causality there. So it's what you call as a cause and effect indicator. So the minute I see this in turn, so you need to ask, so what happens? Evidence suggests that a company that does not do sufficient advertising is unable to achieve a sufficient level of recall value for its product. Fine. Then what happens? So if a company is unable to achieve a sufficient recall value, then what happens? As a result, customers tend to ignore this product, and option C essentially comes from there. And 80% of the batch got this. So a product that does not have a sufficient recall value, what happens? As a result of that, target customers tend to choose a different product. What can that typically lead to? It may lead to lesser sales. You could still the reason I have may and not a definite is you could still be selling more units even with lesser customers, but may is something you can still infer. It may suffer lesser sales, lower sales. But the key point is, did you understand in turn that essentially links insufficient recall value with customers choosing a competitive product? There is a link between A and B, and that's what Ankita spot on. It leads to this. That's the point I really want you to focus in. So when I read this in a GMAT RC passage, the minute I see in turn, cause and effect, something is leading to something. Something happened, as a consequence, something else. That is the thinking that's happening in my head. So most of you chose this. 81% of the batch chose this. So I'm beginning to see that. And perfect, Nagarajan, your point is correct. The only reason why option B is wrong is that word any. And most of you who are familiar with CR, most does not necessarily mean all. Therefore, there could still be some companies which do not fit that criteria. So absolutely right. So, good question. Why not A? Ankita, that's a good question. Spending money on advertising will ensure that an optimal number of customers buy the product. All I know from the passage is, if I don't spend enough money, by the way, I'm not even writing enough money here. I don't know. Maybe may what what option A essentially tells you is maybe I'll spend $1 or 1 rupee on marketing on or advertising. That will ensure that optimal number of customers buy the product. I don't even have the word enough or adequate. That's one reason I will straight away reject option A. But that's a minor point. The major point is still that, hey, the passage only tells you that if you don't spend enough money on advertising, there's a good chance that you won't, a lot of your customers will not buy the product, target customers will not buy the product. That doesn't mean that if I spend money, automatically I'll be able to retain those customers. Not necessarily. There are so many other factors at play. Despite that, my competitor might spend even more money. So if you want an Indian example, Flipkart has been pumping in a lot of money on advertising, and Amazon is still beating Flipkart on most metrics on some days, not all the time, right? Because there are other factors at play. You cannot be sure about that. So that's the point I want you to take away. Intern essentially implies consequence. I won't say evidence. Nothing here is evidence. Everything here is something being stated. Insufficient, if insufficient value, insufficient recall value, as a consequence, it will lead to lesser. So I wouldn't call it evidence, but the link between the two can be inferred. So keep a lookout for cause and effect indicators, since because are also cause and effect, by the way. So question 6 for you. So now I see that you guys are also having a little bit of fun with this, which I'm happy to see. That's a very relatable example. Thanks for that, Nagarajan. We try to think of those as well quite a few times. Let's start bringing those answers in. All right. So last 10 seconds, guys, and then we're gonna start discussing this. 3, 2, 1, and now let's start discussing this. So let me just refresh the answers. Let's see how you guys have responded. All right. So 50% of the batch got the correct answer, and some of you were stuck between two other options to an equal extent. So, very, very important. So, this question actually confused some of you. Only 50% of you got it right. So, there's something here that we definitely need to discuss. Let's get right to it. The words I really want that tilt the balance of this question, that determine whether you're able to crack this question or not, are these. If you understood what this means in its entirety, this is a question that you will solve within 20 seconds, or if you're a little depending on your reading speed, anywhere between 20 to 40 seconds. This is a question that you can solve this fast if you understood upfront what this means. So it has been observed that excessive sugar consumption is usually accompanied by obesity and something else, and also indicates an obesity and additional something else. But let's focus on usually accompanied by. What does the word usually mean? Does it mean certainly? When something usually happens, does it mean it always definitely happens? No. Usually does not. So when you look at the word usually, it does not imply certainty. Does it imply high probability? When something usually happens, can we say that, hey, there's a good probability that it will happen? The answer is yes. Generally is also correct. Essentially, generally essentially takes the same meaning. So there's a higher chance of that happening, likely to happen. So now you guys are thinking. So you from usually, the one thing you cannot infer is certainty. The one thing you can definitely say is something usually happens. That means something is likely to happen. In general, that's what happens. So likely, probably. So you can definitely infer probability. There is a good probability or a good likelihood of that happening. Now let's look at the other part of this keyword. This is essentially two keywords for me rolled into one. When A is accompanied by B, and this is something I kind of hinted at earlier on in the session when I was giving the example. Accompanied by is a keyword that is telling you that these are two coincidental events. So sugar consumption, excessive sugar consumption is accompanied by obesity. That means that along with sugar consumption, you may also see obesity. It does not mean that sugar consumption leads to obesity. So 25% of the class chose option A. Can you be sure that sugar consumption leads to obesity? So let me put it in a very simple way. When you look at accompanied by, the one thing you can say is yes, coincidence is something you can say. These are two events. If A happens along with B, A is accompanied by B, that's two things happening at the same time. Coincidence, yes. You cannot say that two events are linked to each other. You cannot say that sugar consumption is linked to obesity. Not based on this. I'm not talking about the reality of life, but based on what you read here, you cannot say that. So much so is also a keyword. Yes, 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 Nagarajan. Now you're thinking, I like that. I really, really like that, by the way, because I have a slide for it. It's a beautiful keyword. I thought I should put a slide just for that. So from accompanied by, I can definitely say coincidence. I cannot say correlation. Correlation mean A is connected to B in some way. I cannot say that. Neither can I say causality. I cannot say A causes B. I cannot say sugar consumption causes obesity. Or in other words, I cannot say sugar consumption leads to obesity. No. That's why option A is completely incorrect. You cannot infer causality. Neither can you infer certainty. Option A definitely gives you a very definite thing. Sugar consumption will lead to obesity. Don't bring the reality picture into it. As per the passage, no, that's not true. So option B is actually the correct answer. How many of you chose option B? If I recall, 50% of the batch chose option B. Why? Excessive sugar consumption is likely accompanied by, makes sense, probability, likelihood based on usually, perfect. Accompanied by, I'm in fact using the same word, no cause for dispute only. So option B is the correct answer. Option C. So somebody says no C and E, Mohit. Yes. Option C. First of all, there is no real, you cannot infer causality. Even if you can infer causality, if you notice, I have reversed the relationship here. This is saying excessive sugar consumption is caused by obesity. It actually flips the equation. So, for two reasons, option C makes absolutely no sense. Option D was not very popular, which I'm happy to see. It's completely irrelevant. I don't think anybody chose option B. Option D. Option E was also extremely popular. So, the people who chose option B, this portion is still fine. If it happens usually, then you can definitely say that yeah, there is a possibility, you cannot dispute this. But the problem is this leads to, you guys didn't understand what is meant by accompanied by. Accompanied by does not imply causality, which is why option E is not the correct answer. So how was this question? Does this explain a few things to you? Option E played on the likeliness factor, but it was incorrect because of the causality. The usually part made sense, accompanied by did not make sense. Would the inference question on this RC hinge around option E, as in if sugar consumption probably accompanied by obesity and UH diets focus on sugar avoidance? I think if by now we have discussed option E, I think it should be clear now to you. So Seving says you have to be careful to only consider what's given in the passage. So did you like what you just saw? Just a very simple, right? I just gave you a simple two-line statement and asked you to answer a question based on a simple two-line statement. And yet only 50% of the batch got this right. That's how important and beautiful a keyword is. You understand what this means, you're sorted. If you don't understand, very, very difficult. It can get difficult. So, if you really like what you see, one humble suggestion from me, also put a like on that video. That way, YouTube can work its magic as far as algorithms are concerned. This video can reach a lot more people who can benefit from it. So, for good karma, also like the video if you really feel that, hey, this session is working out for you. So now I'm going to talk about. So the takeaways I just discussed, I wrote it to you. So you guys already know this. Now let's do another question that's very, very similar. But I expect you guys to get this question right, given everything we just discussed. So let's do that. Thank you for that, Nagarajan. Yeah, not include external knowledge. Absolutely, Saving. Your point there was right. Mohit says, now I feel keyword is very important not only for RC but for CR too. Uh, when I was learning, when I started out with GMAT, Mohit, and for the rest of you as well, while you guys solve it, it's just in the side story. When I started doing studying for these concepts, I started with CR. I did RC much later, only around 6 months into GMAT. I did RC, but once I did RC, you're right, it changed my approach to CR too. I started focusing on these keywords. It helps you in CR as well. If I had to put it in numbers, I might have been at a 90% before doing RC in CR, but after doing RC, my CR went up to 94%. That's the equivalent improvement I got just by doing RC. Just by doing RC. So let's get those answers in, guys. This is an easy question, shouldn't take your time, given everything we just discussed. Perfect. So let's take another 15 seconds for this question. Perfect. So great. So let's pause it here. Let me quickly check how we did. 90% of the batch got the correct answer now. So that means that you guys are awake. For some of you, I'm sure it's late, but I'm happy to see all of you are awake and you guys are getting the right answer now. Because you learned something in the last question that hopefully you don't forget for your lifetime. So the difference is the only difference between the last passage and this passage, instead of usually, I replaced it with can be. So, and we already discussed if it is can accompanied by, we already discussed, it can only indicate coincidence. You cannot infer causality, you cannot infer correlation. What about can be? What does can be indicate? With can be, you cannot infer certainty. If something can happen, no guarantee that it will happen. So certainty, no. Probability, if something can happen, does it mean that it is likely to happen? The problem is no. So you cannot so with usually you could infer a high probability of the event happening. Exactly. Ankita has and Pallav, I think, and Akshit, all of you are right. The only thing you can say is, hey, there is a possibility that it happens. That's about the only thing you can infer from can be, which is why option E is the correct answer. And most of you, 90% of the batch has got this correct answer now, which is what I'm happy to see. Every other option choice is incorrect or correct for the same reasons. Incorrect for the same reasons. Either it's about that causality or it is about probability or certainty. That's about it. Imagine in your GMAT RC passage, you read this, you understood this right there. You spent 1 second understanding this. Then you imagine when you get a question based on it. By the way, you have a question based on all this. So yeah, it need not occur. Good point, Swati. It need not occur at the same time. Can be accompanied by. No, 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 no. If it's accompanied by, it will happen at the same time. Those two things will happen at the same time. A is accompanied by B, it happens at the same time. That's not true for correlation and causality. There can be a time gap. That's I thought that was the point you were coming to. So, and now let's talk about this. Nagarajan correctly pointed this out. Isn't so much so a keyword? Absolutely. It's one of the most beautiful keywords. So I've actually put a slide just for that. So I'll discuss this very fast. I'm sharing the session PDF with you guys anyway. So do take a look at it. But essentially, it's what I call as an impact enhancing keyword. So it has been observed widely that excessive sugar consumption can be accompanied by obesity and high BP. So much so that several new age diets worldwide focus on sugar avoidance. What this essentially indicates that this observation is so widespread, so it's been observed so widely that to such an extent that to the level that several of these new age diets all across the world focus on sugar avoidance. Essentially, it's enhancing the impact, it's taking it to that next level. So parallel examples of this is to such an extent that to the level that to the extent, that's what this word essentially means. So it's one of the most beautiful keywords that exists. So it's worthy of a slide in itself. Let's do question 8. This is the penultimate question. Actually, this is the last question. The next question we can actually skip through. We can go right to the passage then. Oh, yes, it definitely seconds the opinion presented, but it goes beyond that. It takes it to the next level. Swati, right track. You're on the right track. So, question 8, guys. So, after this, we can go back to solving the passage. Question 9 is just another example, but the concept is covered here, right here. Let's start bringing those answers in, guys. All right, last 10 seconds, and let's start discussing this. 3, 2, 1. Perfect. So, question 8, this particular question is interesting because it actually talks about one of the most, this is a very simple example, but it talks about one of the most important types of keywords that exist. So, I'm talking about what I like to call as comparison keywords. A comparison keyword essentially makes a comparison. There is an entity A that is being compared to an entity B. You can almost, it's, I've seen it in almost every OG passage that I have solved. You can pretty much take it in writing. If there is a comparison somewhere in the passage, there will be at least one question that somewhere along the line tests you on that comparison. It's that important. Every single passage that I've seen, there's something there with regard to comparison. So it's very, very important. Very simple example, but that's what you need to do. So the key to comparison keywords is very simple, guys. There are two questions, there are two things you need to keep in mind. Whenever you see a comparison, what do you mean by comparison? Taller than, heavier than, live longer than, easier than, difficult than. There are other types of comparison keywords also. So when you go through the session PDF, question 9 talks about that. We won't be discussing it today. But think about what taller than means. So the first question that you ask is, what are the two entities being compared? The minute you see a comparison, as you're reading the passage, pause right there, ask the question, what is taller than what? What are the two entities being compared? In this question, what are the two entities being compared? Humans today are being compared with humans from previous generations, right? Simple, right? So today's humans are taller than, ancestral humans, grandparents, great grandparents. So that's one point. Identify the two entities being compared. The second very important point about comparison is, whenever there is a comparison, let's take this example. Just because A is taller than B does not mean that A is tall. Simple example. For all you know, earlier humans, we are talking about grandparents, great grandparents, those humans, let's say they measured in terms of height, they were only 3.5 feet tall, dwarfs technically. And today's humans are only 4 feet tall. By most yardsticks, by most general standards, even today's humans are not tall. So, what does that tell you? Whenever you talk about comparisons, scale is relative. It's never absolute. Just because A is longer than B does not mean A is long. Look at option A. Just because humans today live longer than earlier humans does not mean that humans today have a very healthy lifespan. You cannot say that. That's why option A is incorrect. Because relative scale does not mean absolute. Very important point. The second point, look at option B. Humans today live longer than some other species. Is that the comparison being made? Are humans in terms, see, the aspect being compared is the length, live longer, length of life rather. Does the passage compare humans and other species with regard to length of life? Not at all. Humans are being compared with humans, not with other species, which is why option B is wrong. The only valid answer is option C. Human ancestors were not as tall as humans today, which is true, right? That's essentially what is being stated. So, very, very interesting, very important. And this is an easy example, but you see questions based on this all the time on the GMAT. I'm telling you, I can give it in writing. Perfect. So, Swati, good point. We cannot say that all humans are tall, but on average. So, this entire passage is talking about average. So, on average, humans today have a lengthy lifespan. We cannot say. There may be one or two humans who live for 102 years even today, but the passage is talking about humans in general. It makes it very clear. Humans today on average. Good question. Thank you. Any other questions here? Perfect. However, caught my eye. That's a transition keyword. Perfect. Many humans today on average, since it states it's not true for all humans today. You're talking. This entire passage is about the average human beings in general, which is why option C is the only one which makes sense. So today we will not do a question 9. It's again something related to comparison. I'm sharing the session PDF with you. It's again comparison. The concept is explained. Take it as homework. Now, let's kind of talk about resolving these questions. Did you understand what we just did? We paused at keywords. I showed you what those keywords were, and then you guys would start. And then you guys saw how knowledge of that keyword, knowing what that keyword means, and being able to understand what is going to logically follow, you understand how that helps you in solving those questions. Now, can we try resolving the passage very quickly? Arnab, the point is you're not doing that because you're talking about humans in general. You can say it would not be wrong to answer your question. It would not be wrong if it said some or many, but it's not necessary to mention that. But good question, nevertheless. Thanks for that. So, you guys have already read the passage, but take 3 minutes, read the passage again properly. This time through the lens of keywords. There are multiple keywords all over the place. Try identifying them and solve the questions with that. So 3 minutes to solve the questions, 5 minutes to solve each. So 3 minutes to read the passage, 5 minutes to solve each of the questions. 8 minutes on, we are going to discuss this. Let's start bringing those answers in, guys. All right, guys, last 10 seconds. Take a shot and let's start discussing this. 3, 2, 1, and let's go. So, good job. First, let me make a comparison with how you guys polled earlier. So, if I remember correctly, this was the accuracy of the group earlier. So, we were at 40% till most of these questions. And then, question 5, a lot of you did well. I believe I wrote 75% as the accuracy. This is your old accuracy. Let's talk about how you guys have done now, this time, given everything we just discussed post this session. Let me quickly check through the results. Just give me 1 sec and let me take a final tally. All right. All right. I think some of you chose very hasty answers. That's also reflected here. But overall, I do see a marked improvement. Let me just put those in. All right. So let's kind of come to this. 50 and this question has actually come down a little. You guys got confused. The rest of the questions are at either the second question is at 70%, third question is at 50%, 70, 50 at 40. All right. So good. I can see some improvement right here. Just 1 minute, guys. This one I think is pretty much the same. No real change here. Overall, let's look at what we have done. Question 1, we have moved all the way from 30% to 50%. And don't, no, it's not worse, it's improved, right? So from 30%, 50% of the group is now getting this particular question. So question B also we saw a marked improvement. Question 3 we saw a good improvement. Question 4 remained the same. Question 5 something happened. Some of you got a little more confused. So definitely we should think about that. So what does this tell us? Especially these first 3 questions. When we were designing the session, the first 3 questions were, by the way, the sessions where the questions where keywords really had a made a difference to your answer more than anything else. So what I can see is for those 3 questions, the first 3 questions were specifically put in here because these are the questions for which we actually saw the impact of keywords really coming through. So for those 3 questions, Fantastic. You guys have shown tremendous improvement as a group. Question 4 remain the same. One aspect is the keyword aspect is minimal, and overall as a group, it's this way and that way. And question 5, something interesting has happened. Somewhere you guys got confused. So let's kind of start discussing this. What do we learn from this? Some of the key insights that I want you to take away is keywords. All you need to do is identify, pause, predict. If I were to give an additional tip here, ask why the author put this here. This is what you need to do. Do this and you'll see a marked improvement everywhere. You can see it here. Those first 3 questions, by the way, are the key questions where the keyword aspect is very strong, where if you're not familiar with the keyword, you'll go wrong. And I can see the improvement there. The remaining 2 questions also have a little bit of it, but not as much. So it's very interesting to see that. So when you see keywords, pause right there, understand what's happening. Ask that question, why did the author put it right here? Predict what will follow. And that will really, really help you. Very, very quickly, I'm not going to spend too much time on it, and we're going to do it in a different way, not the way we normally discuss this. I'm going to show you purely from a keyword perspective how you can unlock the meaning from this passage. So everybody's ready? Yeah, there's also the fact that towards the end, a lot of you just rushed your answers in. I can see that. There's the last minute surge in answers that happened. So the accuracy, even on question 5, was actually 83%. Towards the end, a lot of you took free flow shots with that question, and therefore it dipped to 60%. But if I'd given you more time, it would have been in the 85-90% range. So what I see is, yes, you guys have understood what we are trying to say. But now let me also do that very, very quickly. We're going to go through this. Good. So I'm only going to focus on keywords. There are multiple things that you'd ideally focus on, but we're going to employ a pure keyword lens here. So stick with me. Defined as, that's a keyword that tells you that what follows is a definition. So some definition. What is the definition of aggregate measure of production? Then you have equal to. So another version of the definition is coming in because you know it's equal to. So you're seeing another description of something. What is that something? Sum of the gross values added, all residuant, etc., all the way till here. But what do I understand because of the keyword defined as? Very simple. I know that the author is defining GDP. Nothing more than that. By the way, you don't have to by heart and put each and every word here into your head. That's not required. What you really need to understand, thanks to the keyword defined as, is that, hey, what you're seeing is the definition of something that is called as GDP. You understood that, you're good. So defined as aggregate measure of production equal to something something. GDP is a basic standard to measure the standard of living. And in turn, you guys remember this? The economic well-being of a population. So what does that tell you? What has the author done in this passage, in this particular paragraph? He's given you what is the definition of GDP. What is GDP and what is it really used for? It's used to measure the standard of living, and as a consequence, by measuring standard of living, or in other words, in turn, used to measure the economic well-being of the population. So should be very clear. Let's quickly move to the second paragraph. You're anyway going to get access to the slides, so you're going to have all these examples for some of these keywords right there with you. Now let's look at the second paragraph. By the way, I've highlighted the keywords as well. It's going to be as simple as that. However, you're starting with the keyword. So the last paragraph, or at least what you read so far, was, hey, what is GDP useful for? Something positive about GDP. So what's going to follow? Something negative about GDP. Precisely. Critics are of the opinion, critics' view, not necessarily author's view. What is their opinion? National GDP figures do not reveal significant regional variations. Fine, it does not show, it kind of masks or hides the regional variations within the region. It only shows the overall number. Then you have justly content. Did you notice justly this time around? Everybody, did you notice justly? And that's the point. You notice this right there. You know that the author agrees with what is going to follow. They justly contend. So these critics are making a contention. That's essentially the point they want to make. Their assertion. It's the same as argued for. It's all the same. So They justly contend. So the author agrees with whatever is following here. Within each region, there are areas of relative prosperity, contrasting with unemployment, black spots, deep-rooted social, etc. And that is a keyword that you should pay attention to. It's a keyword that tells you something more in the same direction. So it's an additional point. So one point is about, you know, areas of relative prosperity contrasting with, unemployment, black spots, etc., etc. Another point, GDP figures on their own do not represent income distribution. 2 points. Just by latching on to keywords, I'm unlocking the meaning of this passage. So essentially, critics don't consider GDP as a good measure. Very specifically, this paragraph, he's talked about economic well-being, right? He's talking about income distribution, economic deprivation. So he's talking about economic well-being. There could be other types of well-being. So, but in this passage, in this paragraph, he's talking about economic well-being. That's the key learning there. So GDP does not show. There's a reason one, reason two. How do I know it's reason one, reason two, and that point one and point two? It's as simple as that. The fundamental point, if you did not notice justly, there is no way you pick this up. Other agrees with the critics. These are all the keywords that lead me to unlock this meaning. Let's quickly come to the next paragraph. So typically, when we discuss passages, we also do a lot of summarizing and prediction, but that's not today's topic. So again, do consider looking at the free trial. It can help you. Or attending tomorrow's session. Definitely there's something for you there about summarization. But coming back to this paragraph. Essentially, what's happened in this paragraph is author has defined GDP, author has told you what GDP is used for, and then the author has presented the critics' opinion that GDP is not a good measure of the economic well-being. So, and everything is linked. GDP is a basic standard to measure standard of living, and in turn, economic well-being. Now, the author is dismantling that economic well-being part by using the critics' view, which he agrees with. That hey, you said economic well-being, but GDP is not a good measure of economic well-being, boss. That's what is being said here. Let's look at the next paragraph. The idea that rising national prosperity, how many of you notice this, can still be accompanied by? If you notice this, definitely one question you would have got correct. And that's one of the actual questions. I did not create that question. I'm telling you these keywords matter. If you notice this, you would have got that question. So, the idea that rising national prosperity can still be accompanied by, can possibility accompanied by coincidental events, still, by the way, is an interesting word that indicates a contrast. Despite rising national prosperity, still something bad can happen. So that is what is being said, right? National prosperity along with poverty, that's bad. That still actually indicates a contrast in this case. If you understood this, you have unlocked the meaning of pretty much the whole paragraph. So idea that rising national prosperity can still be accompanied by rising relative property is the opening line. Again, Swati, I'm happy to see you picked up on rightly so. The author's agreement comes out through rightly so. So the real thing is, if you there are just two words, there are just two keywords in this entire passage that tell you what the author believes in. Otherwise, it's only what the critics say. Just with the word justly and the word rightly so, these are the only two indications in the entire passage that even as per the author, GDP is not a good metric at all. So the author is using the critics' point of view, the critics' argument to criticize GDP. By the way, that's why you guys saw an improvement in your main point question. Question number one from 30% to 50%. That's because you guys figured out justly and rightly so. Am I correct or am I not correct? And that's the point. That's the power of it. That's why you saw the 30% to 50%, because you guys paid attention to justly and rightly so. In question one, main point. Because earlier, a lot of you fell for option C, which is incorrect. So, very quickly now, can still be accompanied by rising relative property. It is rightly so. So the author agrees with it, of the argument that critics present against the use of GDP as a measure of general well-being. Need to pay attention to detail. Overall, GDP is used as a measure of standard of living. So standard of living is not just economic well-being, it's also general well-being, non-economic aspects also. So general well-being is economic, non-economic. Then the author dismantled the economic part by presenting the critics' argument. Now, what is he doing in this paragraph? Not just economic, boss, even non-economic aspects. Even if I look at general well-being, GDP is not a good metric. That's what he's trying to tell you here. This word general is important. If you really pay attention to detail, you'll figure it out. So, measure of the general well-being. And now the author gives examples. Such as is a keyword which exemplifies, which essentially means examples. Accompanied, rightly so, such as, these are the keywords for me. So changes such as, examples, increase in pollution, other negative externalities can accompany. You notice how the author does not change his structure. It's not like here he suddenly said leads to, because the author knows what he's writing. Trust the author, he's not going to goof it up. Not on the GMAT. The same point has to be conveyed. It's consistent. Also, keyword indicating we are still continuing from the last point. So what was the critic doing? What was the author doing? Trying to tell you that GDP is not a good indicator even for general well-being. That was the point he was trying to make. For that, he gave one example, another example. Now he's continuing with more examples. Also, output figures reflect nothing but little on the quality of goods and services produced. This is a point where a lot of you might have got confused. What does this mean? May not be a keyword per se, but it's an important phrase to understand. Think about a mirror reflection. When you say A does not reflect much about B, that tells me that based on A, you cannot say anything about B. It's as simple as that. You cannot say that if A increases, B will also increase, because then that means that A and B would be a good reflection of A. If A increases and B also increases, that's a proper reflection, right? Think about your mirror, as simple as that. But what the author is saying is reflects nothing but little, or in other words, you cannot say it's a reflection. So just because output figures increase, you cannot say quality of goods and services increase. Vice versa is also true. Just because output figures decrease, you cannot say goods and services increase. Or in other words, based on output figures, you cannot say anything about quality of goods and services. That is what is meant by reflect nothing but little. That's it, nothing more. Rocky, I think you missed a lot of the session. So this is precisely what we discussed. Those two words, justly and rightly so, actually tell you what the author believes. So the YouTube session is available. It's obviously will be available on YouTube. Do go through the entire session. I'm sure you'll get it. I hope that will help you. So now it's very clear. This entire stretch was just extending, adding more points as to why GDP is not a good measure of general well-being also. So if everything here is clear, not to mention that is another keyword, that's homework, you guys can figure it out. What have I done in this passage? Think about all the keywords that I saw. Defined as, equal to. Then I looked at in turn, however. Justly was very important. Content was told me something. Then I had this and that it told me it's an additional point. Then I had can still be accompanied, which is very important, right? And rightly so is very important, right? Also told me something. Not to mention that reflect nothing but little. So look at everything that I've highlighted. For those of you who believe that, hey, you need to have good vocabulary to crack RC, look at all these words that unlocked meaning for you in this passage. Any of these words are unfamiliar or tricky? Not at all, right? And that's the point I want to make. None of this it's not about vocabulary. GMAT is not at all a test of vocabulary. It's purely a test of your ability to comprehend information. And aggregate, it's not really a keyword. It's essentially telling you aggregation. It's taking the combined thing. You wouldn't call it a keyword, by the way. But yeah, it's an important word. But do you guys see what we're doing? None of these words are unfamiliar to you. Most of these words you know. The minute you start paying attention to these words as you solve the passage, you are able to unlock layers of meaning that you otherwise might have missed out on, or you would have got it when you came back to it trying to analyze questions and option choices. So fundamentally, the author presented a definition of GDP, then he told you what GDP is used for. Then the author brought to you the critic's view. Hey, GDP is not a good measure of economic well-being. Why? Because it was used to measure standard of living and through that it was used to measure economic well-being. So this point was being dismantled. How do you know the author is agreeing to this criticism? Because justly and rightly so. Reasons given, author agrees with the critic. Second paragraph, what happened? Because you're talking about standard of living, it's not just economic well-being. You also have other aspects, non-economic aspects, general well-being. This paragraph, the author has fundamentally dismantled that point also, using the critic's argument. Now, if this is clear to you, that's why at some level this passage is nothing but a criticism of GDP. It's saying, hey, GDP is not at all a good measure of standard of living, which comprises of things like economic, non-economic. Not at all. GDP is not a good metric. That's the final point that your author is really trying to say. He is agreeing to this criticism. He's using the the critic's point of view to make his point, his or her point. Which is why the correct answer, a lot of you initially chose option C, which is why earlier the accuracy for this was 30% for this question, but it went up to 50% because the difference between objectively describing and criticizing. To objectively talk about something, that means I'm not putting my opinion into it. I'm just a neutral person giving a very objective analysis of something. That's what we mean by objective description. The problem with option C, it does not capture the author's sentiment. The author also agrees with that criticism. The author put that criticism there because he agrees with it in this case. He told you that, hey, this is the criticism and this is correct, which means option D is the correct answer. Those of you who figured out the keywords justly, rightly so, you were the people who shifted the accuracy from 30% to 50% for this question. And I think I will be very right if I'm telling that. So you'll get the slides. I'm just going to quickly run through this. There's nothing here. Option C was the most popular incorrect choice, and for this particular reason, nothing else. What else do we have? Which of the following can be inferred in the passage? So this is another question where we saw the numbers get better. I'm just very quickly going to tell you why people went wrong. Right? A lot of you chose, some of you at least chose option C. Do you see the comparison keyword here? Can you connect this with what you read, what we discussed in comparison? The passage says when they work longer for usual, quality of life suffers. The keyword in the passage is longer than usual. Option C says long. Do you see what we are doing here? Which is why option C is actually incorrect. Those of you who fell for option C, do you see it now? Logically, Deepak, think about well-being and standard of living. It's pretty much synonymous, almost. In RC, you will always see the change of words trying with the same intended logical meaning. So this is what I mean by how you can go wrong in an RC question if you don't focus on the keywords. Longer than usual, the relative scale was what is given in the passage, not long. Longer in a country where people work only for 3 hours in a day. Tomorrow they start working 4 hours in a day. Will you say now that they're working for long hours and their quality of life is suffering? No, they're still working only half day. They're still working only 4 hours a day. That's the point. So, oh yeah, Pallav, that's also a good point. Option D is the correct answer here. Because this follows from that other thing. An increase in the overall goods reflect nothing but little. Just because overall goods produced, or in other words GDP, by that definition, just because GDP increases does not necessarily mean that quality of goods increases, which is precisely what is meant by reflect nothing but little. If you understood that, you would have got this. As simple. Option C, the correct answer is based on the keyword in turn. Where is it? Because what does it take? The measure of standard of living is linked to. Causality is a link, right? A is linked to B. That's why A causes B. A happens, then B happens. So if it's used to measure standard of living, in turn it's used to calculate the economic well-being of the population. That is essentially why option E is the correct answer. You would have got it now. Principle, right? I'm not going to spend too much time discussing this because pretty much done as far as the session is concerned. The session PDF is there. I'm just discussing where you could have gone wrong. But if there's something specific, I'll always help you out. Question 4. Question 4. A lot of you fell for option A. And yet again, it's only about paying attention. The question, the reason why option A is incorrect is rising national prosperity or rising national GDP. Rising means increasing. It's again, you guys are not focusing on the comparison aspect. Increasing does not mean it's high. If out of on a scale of 100, if your GDP today is 10 and it increases to 15, 15 is still low. You cannot say high national GDP, but it will still match what is being given here. As long as the GDP is rising, it's okay. But what option A says is high national GDP can mask problems. The passage nowhere talks about high national GDP. It only talks about increasing national GDP. You see the difference? Pure wordplay, as Nagarajan pointed out. But if you really pay attention to all these words here, you cannot go wrong here. So, what is the correct answer here? Oh, my apologies. I think I explained the wrong answer for this. Here, the correct answer was this, right? High national GDP can mask problems that may otherwise be present. This was my explanation first was the next question, unfortunately. See, what does the author tell you? A national GDP can mask the problems. So even if you have a high national GDP, my apologies, I actually explained the answer to the next question just by accident. It happens sometimes. So a high national GDP can mask problems that may otherwise be present. Let me explain this again. What does the author tell you? Even so, what does the passage tell you? Even when there is high GDP, just because even in places where there are high GDP, first paragraph, even in places where there are high GDP, these regional variations are not being caught. Or in other words, those are getting masked. So that's why option A actually makes sense. So my apologies for the small mix up because I'm also rushing through. My brain is also fried. It happens sometimes. So let's look at the last question. This is a question where somehow you guys dipped after the session. Somewhere your answers came down. Thanks, Nagarajan, for pointing it out. Yeah, it happens. It happens in the end of the night. Yeah. Which of the following is true based on the contention that such output figures reflect nothing but little on the quality of goods and service produced? This is where the confusion was. I looked at this point. The passage only talks about rising national output. Rising can be 10 to 15, it's still low. Option A talks about extremely high national output. Can it be correct? A lot of you chose this. The reason the accuracy dipped towards the end in this question is a lot of you chose option A. But look at option A. A country with an extremely high national output can produce products and services that are of low quality. Does the passage talk about countries with an extremely high national output? Not at all. The only thing we know is reflect nothing but little. Or in other words, looking at national output, looking at GDP, that is national output, you cannot say anything about quality of goods and services. That's the only inference you can make based on what is given in the passage. Right? If you got that, yeah, this fundamentally is the key point here. If you got that, nothing like it, which is why option A is correct. Incorrect, completely incorrect. Rising output does not mean high output. This was the point I was discussing for the last question, but you guys would have got it now. And Nagarajan, you're right. The correct, oh, you fell for option A, but the correct answer is D. Absolutely. A rising national output, not necessarily accompanied by. You see the wording also, even the option choice is using accompanied by because the option choice is correct here. A rising national output is not necessarily accompanied by a rising quality of goods. Or in other words, reflects nothing but little. If you understood what is meant by reflects nothing but little, option D is very, very intuitive for you. You will reject option A the minute you see extremely high. You will reject option B when you see low national output. None of this is being discussed. You'll reject option C similarly. Then you'll come to option D and like, hey, this makes sense. This is essentially nothing but reflect nothing but little. This is why option D is the correct answer here. So this question, surprisingly, a lot of you probably got confused here and went for this. Option A was one of the most popular option choices. All right. Quick takeaways from this session. What you need to really take away from what we did. What are keywords? We discussed this. Typically, they convey a meaning, transitions, continuing the same line of thoughts. We saw all these examples. We saw a lot of examples. Fundamentally, you need to pause when you see a keyword. Pause, understand why the author put it there, predict what will logically follow. Your comprehension will be much, much, much better. It will be what you see here, 30% to 50%, 40% to 70%. We saw that in most of those questions. And that's because you guys started going through RC passages through the lens of keywords. So truly, if you really focus on keywords, unlocking tough passages, getting full comprehension, extracting meaning from comprehension, from really tough RC passages, not as difficult as you think it is. So with that, we kind of come to the end of the session. So just a quick reminder of all the things that I earlier discussed. If you liked what we did here and you want to explore a little more of what we did, do consider trying going for the free trial. It can help you. It can really help you. We have an RC session tomorrow, and that goes beyond just keywords. Today we were focused at a very minute level on just keywords. Tomorrow's session is a little more generic. We are going to cover not just keywords, some other strategies as well. So definitely it can be useful for you. So those of you who are free and want to take a shot, make sure you register for this. We have a con session coming up. I already discussed about this. It's going to be different from the usual con session. This is more like con strategy. It will give you personalized insights about what you need to do. And for those of you who have GMAT on the horizon, do consider scheduling a call with us. Right to support, they'll help you schedule a call with the certified strategy expert. They'll put you on a personalized plan that can help you as far as the GMAT is concerned. So on behalf of Kanupriya, Atreya, GMAT Club, and all of us at eGMAT, I thank you for being with us. It's been a long session. I thank you for being patient with us, and happy learning. So let me quickly read through the comments if there's something. And also, guys, because it's a YouTube session, let YouTube algorithms work its magic. If this session was useful for you, you think that you learned something, please consider putting a like on this video. It helps a lot. Your GMAT is on Monday. All the best. Do well. That's all we'll say. Do well, but I hope this was useful. All the best, Shashwat. So thank you for your feedback, guys. Seving, Ashutosh, Shrey Jyoti, Akshit, all of you. Zia. I really hope the session was useful for you. And if it was useful for you, and in terms of comments, likes, and we really see that, we will plan a lot more of this. Even I don't remember my GMAT club handle, my own handle, but do follow GMAT. I mean, do follow eGMAT's handle. So yeah. So we typically do handle eGMAT's handle. So make sure you follow eGMAT's handle on GMAT Club. All right. So I think we are done. So finally, thank you for being patient and going through the session. I really hope this session was useful for you. Happy learning. I'll see you next time.